We're back with Fable 2, and as it turns out, this game also has DLC that I never bothered with, just like Fable 3. In the last Fable video, I thought I'd clear that up and go and actually bother with the DLC, and so we're going to do that for Fable 2, but with a purple thumbnail. And that summarises the dumpster fire you're about to watch today. You see, Fable 3 had an awful lot more downloadable content than 2 did. Most of it was vapid nonsense that you'd never need, nor would it actually add anything to the experience. But Fable 2 only really appears to have 2 major expansions, so naturally I got my hopes up and hoped that that meant quality over quantity. And I guess you'll have to stay tuned to find out whether or not I believe that to actually be the case. You see, Fable 2 is a fantastic game and I'm massively fond of it, so more of Fable 2 that I'm yet to experience regardless is an absolute win. So I fired up the game, only to realise that I'd installed the free versions of the DLCs that only allow you to access the content provided you're playing it in co-op with somebody who'd actually purchased them. For DLC, it's quite a respectable setup, but since the odds of me having a friend playing Fable 2 who has those DLC and is willing to co-op with me are quite low, I had to make the tenner plunge. It's not that bad, it's a sum that I'd happily drop on watching a 90-minute football match on EFL iFollow, only to watch my favourite football club hemorrhage players and get battered by literally everybody. So even if these are shit, at least it's more shit for my money. So in order to experience our first expansion, I'm not sure if this is in order, I'm not sure I care either, we must go and see Murgo. How did he get his cart there? How did he manoeuvre his cart into a position it will not fit through into, either up a staircase because it's too heavy, or beneath a derrick that just isn't big enough? It doesn't have a horse, and I can't imagine power steering existing in the Fable universe, so we haven't started either DLC, and my brain is already bleeding. But anyway, this is the See the Future DLC. A quick conversation with Murgo in which he reminds us that he's the man who sold us the music box at the beginning of Fable 2 that resulted in our sister dying, so I don't understand why he's still breathing. Fuck you, Murgo. And he has new curiosities to sell us for 5 gold pieces apiece. It's like 30 years have passed. Is inflation just not a thing? I'd like to think my actions in Fable 3 are evidence to the contrary. So he gives us some random crap, along with a cursed Snowglobe that we can activate from our inventory, and it took me an embarrassing amount of time to find it. But activating it will transport us inside the Snowglobe to what appears to be a debug build of the game. Our objective is to lift the curse and restore the colour. I'm not entirely sure why, just do it. Along the way we face new threats such as blue men and their Crayola brethren. Until we come along, for some reason they appear to be sucking on the Snowglobe's inhabitants. Feel free to take that as a euphemism, but now they're being put to the sword, which is also blue. And that's kind of intentional. Their colour indicates what weapon is best suited to defeating them. So if they're blue, the sword. If they're yellow, a gun or a crossbow. And if they're red, you've got to use your will. Not that there's an indication for that, because there's no physical manifestation of will that's always present. If they're red, just assume it's the one that isn't a colour you can see. It's clear that the shadows have sucked the colour out of this town. I'm not sure how it's possible, but we are kind of in a Snowglobe anyway. I would be more disappointed if it did make sense, so we investigate the town and aid this school mistress in finding some children. Upon doing that, she gives us a key, so clearly we're on the right track. Fortunately, I already found a red door that I could slap it in. Inside this dungeon, we find the shadow cultists. As it turns out, killing them lifts the curse. With colour restored to the town, the spirits of the cursed Snowglobe are free. I mean, it's a unique quest, arguably speaking, kind of the bare minimum for a DLC like this. Besides that, this quest isn't anything special, but then again, I'm going to reserve the vast majority of my judgment until we're done, because I've seen the results of the poll I put on the community tab, and out of 4,700 odd people, 55% say that Fable 2 is their favourite in the series. So on the off chance that the Fable fanbase has a mafia, I will reserve my judgment until I've made a comment that I feel is worth losing my fingers over. But for what it's worth, as far as the art design of this mission is concerned, I did almost forget what colour looked like. But now it's time to teleport away from here and return to Murgo, who just so happens to have yet another cursed artifact to sell us yet again for 5 gold pieces. This time it's not an artifact as harmless as a Snowglobe, it's a skull. so I'm sure that'll end well. This time we're teleported to what appears to be a graveyard of some sort, where we talk to a spooky face that doesn't have a spooky voice.
I sense the presence of the living.
And now all I can think about is how funny it would be if Darth Vader was Chris Pratt. Seemingly the source of the curse, the face asks us to go and collect some wisps for him so he can be freed. That is such an utterly splendid idea. I will be right back, my friend. To collect the wisps, we need to dress up as a plethora of enemies that we face in the game, such as Hollow Men, Balverines. So that's where the poison Balverine came from, I guess. He's back. And of course, who could forget Hobbs. I do wonder if this is the Fable equivalent to being a furry. In solving some rather straightforward puzzles and collecting enough wisps, we can free the cursed knight.
Thank you, witless mortal. You have granted me my freedom. Now, I will grant you the greatest gift of all, death!
Now, nobody saw that one coming. From a narrative perspective, why didn't he just wait until he was clear of this place and us before he started doing evil things? Why did he need to attack us when he's already tricked the hero? It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I think it's kind of by design. It's Fable. It is a little bit silly, but it's even sillier for him because he's already dead. But the curse is now lifted, so we can return to Murgo again. He gives us yet another trinket. This time, it's a statuette of the Tattered Spire, and using it teleports us to the real one, where we see Teresa again. And this time she offers to show us our future. She tells us that we become the King of Albion. We have soldiers, people who love/fear us, and a throne, which is all well and good.
This is the real future. His child, not yet born, but destined for greatness. A child on whom the fate of Albion will depend one day, as will the fate of Aurora.
Oh, the DLC's just a shameless marketing campaign for Fable 3. Well, that is kind of disappointing, but I had an inkling that it would be something to do with that, considering the DLC is called See the Future. But at least we get some cool royal garments out of the situation. Murgo tells us that his source all along for his magical artifacts has been Teresa, which is a nice bit of world building to slap on the end of what must feel like a massive disappointment. We now know what we've always known. Teresa has been pulling the strings the whole time. But as one last thing, we also get this cool Colosseum, and that's alright. But as fun as it is, considering you can redo the Crucible as many times as you want for prizes, I actually kind of fail to see what the point is. But this Fable 2 expansion's main purpose appears to be building hype for Fable 3. I didn't expect it to be as short as it was either. I thought it was going to go on for a bit longer. But it's kind of just two weird Fable 2 side quests that aren't necessarily of the highest quality when compared to some of the side content in the actual base game, followed by Teresa giving us a Fable 3 teaser trailer that we've had to pay for. But it's okay because at least this DLC came with a potion that allowed me to turn my dog into a husky. At least in Fable 2 that's combined with something that tries to be meaningful content. In 3, changing the dog's breed is a separate DLC pack altogether. So See the Future gets a bonus point for that, but really not an awful lot else. Anyway, let's move on to the other expansion. Knothole Island. We meet up with a guy named Gordon in Bowerstone, who formally requests a hero's help with regards to an issue being experienced by the residents of Knothole Island.
My name is Gordon. I come from Knothole Island, which is in dire need of your help.
Like the brave warrior we are, we accept.
I hope my submarine can hold 2 people.
Words cannot express how much real estate value that joke has gained. When we arrive, Knothole Island is a rather chilly place. It appears to be in an aesthetically pleasing indefinite winter stage, and according to the chieftain of Knothole Island, that's the problem. Apparently the town requires the use of weather totems to control the climate, and since they've clearly lost control of the totems, the climate too has gotten out of control. So we agree to go and activate the sun totem to bring this place some much needed warmth. Whee! So of course that requires us to head into a dungeon, fight some enemies and do some puzzles. And of course who can forget the treasure we find along the way. After a short bit we eventually find the sun totem and activate it. And as you can imagine, it doesn't take an awfully long time for this action to backfire. Returning to the surface, Knothole has immediately been thrust into a stage that can only be described as a drought. Where there was a massive lake, there is now only a massive ditch with the occasional puddle in it. But the chieftain seems pleased, so sod it, we've done a good deed, I guess. Since I'm sure this extreme weather won't have its consequences, we can leave. Upon fast travelling away, a new quest activates telling me to return to the island. This is because the DLC is intended to run simultaneously with the main story, and I've already finished the main story. So I guess we're going back.
Oh, you? Yes, it's about time you came back. Look at the mess you've left us in. You've turned our beautiful island into a desert.
The cheek on this guy! So the chieftain asks us to fix our supposed mistake by finding the storm totem. You can see where this is going. Why isn't there a temperate totem? The people of this town think I'm ugly. I do not have time for this shit. To be fair though, that as a premise within itself has more Fable charm to it than the See the Future expansion. So yeah, why not? I'll activate the storm totem. It's a rather straightforward puzzle. All it takes is imitating the expressions of some statues. And then you kinda just slap up some flit switches as you go. I will say, if you don't like those, this DLC will absolutely do your tree in. There's some fights, because of course there is. What would a dungeon be without some hobs? But aside from the hobs, there are also some lovely hollow men. But with all that dealt with, we can use the storm totem. I like that the objective makes it seem like it's unsure if that's the best decision. But regardless, with that done, it's now raining. I'm sure the chieftain will be pleased.
Oh, rain, glorious rain. At the island once again, all thanks to the cunning guidance I've offered you.
He seems to pat himself on the back a lot. But alas, we've done the job. We've saved Knothole Island. It's time for us to go off and maybe do something else finally. Oh, you are taking the piss. Sometimes it's really hard to tell why I even bother.
So, the bringer of drizzle, flooding, and chaos returns. Your meddling must have angered the gods, because they haven't stopped spitting at us since you left. I hold you personally responsible, and there's only one way we can resolve this unfortunate situation.
We're gonna make it snow again. This expansion is not without its flavour and charm, but this is only our third visit to the island, and it already feels as if we're going around in circles, because now we need to venture through the storm shrine to find the snow totem. This quest abuses flit switches to utter excess. They are everywhere and sometimes function as part of puzzles that just barely work, which can be incredibly frustrating. It's got some fights in there to break down all the switch puzzles, which is greatly appreciated, but it's certainly not up there as one of my finest experiences in Fable 2. But eventually, after a short bit of nothing really notable happening, we eventually find a troll, which is always a welcome change of pace, and once that's out of the way, we can find the ice totem and save the day. And now we're back to the exact same extreme weather that we found Knothole Island in to begin with. However, now the weather can be controlled from the town itself, so we just hop into this chamber and change the weather whenever we like. But there's one last decision to make. The people here appear to be hosting something of a referendum. Either we side with the people and oust the chieftain for being a greedy, egocentric bastard, or we side with the chieftain knowing full well we could batter anyone here for a sum of 10,000 gold. I decided to side with the people because I've already given everybody in Albion plentiful reason to hate me. But Knothole Island is now saved, and control over the weather now lies with the people. And we have an entire new town that we can explore and assimilate into our own property empire. Naturally, the first thing I did was enter the weather chamber and decide to inflict a massive drought on the place. And that's because I'm nice. You get loads of cool bits and bobs in this DLC, and there's also a 10-part series of books detailing the lore of this island within the Fable universe, and I think that's rather snazzy. I'd say it's the better of the two Fable 2 expansions, but it isn't especially long, and you spend the entire thing effectively solving puzzles and fighting enemies to get to totems so you can change the weather. Both expansions just feel like they're regular side quests that may be a little bit odd when compared to the rest of the game, but they would have blended in a lot better had they just been a part of it. But even for 2008 standards, neither really stood out as being worthy of extra money. Or should I say, especially for 2008 standards. But at least Knothole Island has a nice look to it, some nice lore and all of that stuff. you know what, Fable 3 might just have the better expansions. Not by an awful lot, and on average, certainly not. There are simply too many DLCs that add absolutely nothing and are there to take your money for the sake of it. But Fable 3 at the very least had Traitor's Keep going for it, and I really enjoyed that one actually. It was far from perfect, but it's probably the better of the Fable 2 and 3 expansions. It at the very least has an interesting story to it, unlike the See the Future expansion, which is just a vague sales pitch for Fable 3. And the main story of Knothole Island just consists of the weather. So in my opinion, as it turns out, it is not a quality over quantity situation with regards to Fable 2's DLC, and that's because I don't suspect downloadable content was really as much of a priority for Fable 2 as it was for 3. And what I mean by that is, in its base condition, it's still arguably the superior game, even when compared to Fable 3 with its expansions. So I guess in that respect, it really just doesn't matter. I suppose that's kind of the end of this video. I don't know what else there is that I could possibly say. So, yeah, thank you all for watching. Hopefully, I'll see you soon.